Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to Where Wendy Creates. Today we are making a lovely over double-size quilt, almost a queen-size quilt, and we are using some of the same fabrics we did on a similar quilt earlier in the year. I hope that you will enjoy this process as much as me. Let's get started. We're going to start with sewing some blocks together. We have 10.5 by 10.5, 10.5 by 13.5, and 10 by 10. So different rows will be different sizes. We are using up all of our scraps and having fun. Okay, one more row complete. Our quilt has 10-inch squares, 10.5-inch squares, and 13.5 by 10.5-inch squares. So we're going to go ahead and make some of these focal blocks with that, similar to a log cabin effect, but we are using non-straight leftover pieces of fabric, in other words, waste, and we're putting them together to create this beautiful scrappy block. And our goal is to make 5 of these scrappy blocks today. And we're trimming up these pieces to just be one individual piece. And then we're going around them with the log cabins to create some scrappy focal blocks, because we want to use these in the quilt, and they're all different sizes. So what do you do when you have a quilt that you have purchased a panel for, because this is part of a panel, and they're all different sizes? That's what we're doing today, my friends. We're making another beautiful animal nature quilt. We are looking for our smallest pieces. So we're using up our scraps. And this one just happens to be the right size, and these two are both too small. So we're lining them up, going across with our 1/4-inch seam allowance, right sides together. And we're just going to go to the next and the next, looking for our smallest pieces that are long enough to go across our blocks. And we are not throwing away anything that's too small, because we've got more in store for them. See if this green one will fit on this rabbit. My goodness, it looks like it was made for it. All right. And the major trick to these is going to be making their final size, the 10.5 by 10.5 or 10 by 10 or 13.5 by 10.5 to fit our block pieces that we have for our larger focal points. Okay. And again, never throw away those scraps. We can use them in so many different projects, so many different ways. And look at the square left over. That could be the start for a log cabin block, and just keep building around it. And the proper thing to do is run over to the ironing board, press these open, go back over to the cutting board, trim them off proper, and then go for the next line. And over at the ironing board, we're just going to take our pieces and we're going to press them to where our seams are going to lay flat and open. All right, off to the cutting board, trim them up nice and neat, and then we go on to our next piece. And we're back with our blocks trimmed off and pressed, and now we're on to our next side. And I just try to always keep right sides together. And I am going to put more layers on the top and the bottom because some of these I want to be the 13.5. And it's okay to be scrappy. You don't have to follow that true log cabin look. And we are searching for pieces that are not the same color on each side that we go down. We just got to make sure we have a straight edge at the top. We'll trim it at the bottom. And if it's not straight at the top, we'll have it slightly over so we can go back to the cutting board and make it perfect. Look at this beautiful long strip. And as we get more and more built up on this focal block, or the nature scene, the animal that we're putting the log cabin effect around, we want to just make sure our seams are laying flat underneath the way we press them, so we're not messing that up. And again, none of these are going to be perfectly square. We just want them perfectly square before we sew them to the next block that they're going to be next to. We've got our moose. And it looks like the next piece on our strip is going to be this beautiful one. Make sure we determine which sides are the front and back, and then we're going to line it up and sew it. And we're going to keep on going like this around until once we're at the cutting board, one time we see that we're at least at that 10-inch size on one of the strips, and then perhaps we'll see if we've got to put another one on the top or the bottom to match up. And then we can call it done. pieces are growing. And after each piece we add, we do want to come over to the ironing board and press them so they stay beautiful and crisp. Then we'll bring them back over to the cutting board and keep going through the cycle over and over until our 5 beautiful focal point blocks are complete and ready to go in our quilt. And we're just trimming up our blocks. And save all of your scraps. Don't be throwing those away. Just hit that subscribe button because I'm going to show you lots of ways to use our scraps. And again, it's kind of hard to keep a square quilt when the original block that you started with doesn't look like it is square. As you see, our bear has a lot more white in different parts of them than others. Of course, some of that's going to straighten out, and this one's just all lopsided. Just the fabric pieces that we're adding on were not square to begin with because, again, we're using our scraps, but at the end, we're going to put our larger ruler on top of them and straighten them all up. Our first block is large enough to be a 10.5 by 13.5. So we're just going to go ahead and we've pressed it nice. Now we're going to trim it up to our 10.5 by 13.5 size that we're looking for. And we just made it slightly over, so not bad at all. I'm pretty excited. Okay, now to make sure it is our 13.5, which I'm sure it is a pinch larger than that at the moment. So we're looking at it is now 14 and a fraction. Of course, this side is a little bit longer. So let's go ahead and flip this one over. We're going to trim it off on this side. We're going to level it up on 3 of our sides. We're going to trim off the top at our 13.5 inch length. So again, a little bit curvy here. Now this is going to go into our scraps, all of these. And this beautiful block is our scrappy focal block ready to go into our quilt. Next up is yellow. Ooh, that's a long one. Let's use a darker piece for our moose. Looks like we have enough to continue on into our rabbit. Beautiful nature's bunny. And our bear. Let's put, he needs it on the top. And choose a browner one, reddish brown. Put that right here at the top. And our blocks are definitely growing. So I am so excited about these. I cannot wait to measure them, trim them down to size, and put them into this quilt. I'm so excited. The last quilt that we are kind of mimicking today is had 3 of these blocks in it, and we now have 5 blocks. I think these 4 are large enough now, so we have 5 blocks. And we're just finishing up the last 3 of our focal blocks. And that will make them 10.5 by 13.5. Oopsie. Okay, and we got 2 blocks there. And let's go ahead and sew these 2 together. I'm gonna put this one onto the trains. Line them up nicely. Each block takes a minute to get organized. I think our blocks are coming together very nicely, so we are sewing, sewing, sewing. Today, my friends, we are making a quilt that is a sibling or a runoff or a use the leftover pieces of this quilt here that I'm just in the process of putting it on the long arm. So I wanted to go ahead and see if I can lay out the pieces and have enough pieces to make a quilt that is similar to this. And that way we'll have twin queen size quilts. And I have my stack of blocks and my stack of rows, and now we're going to go ahead and lay them out on the bed and see how they look and what blocks I should put where in the next row. Since we are not working off of a pattern and instead we're using nature and travel blocks, we are laying these out and seeing how they fit with one another. And I'm thinking, since I don't have side borders at this time that I may want to add on a 7th block on each row instead of 6 blocks in a row. I think I'm going to add the 7th block. So the second row up there is not sewn together. I'm liking the layout. It's not 100% hitting me right, but I'm still enjoying it and liking it. So let's go ahead and add one more block to each row. And then we'll sew our second row together, and then we'll sew all rows together. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of 7 each, because we're adding 1. And then we'll be ready to add the borders. And are you ready for this? I'm so excited to show you this. Looky, looky, looky. I've already sewn these pieces together, and I have the bear in the water coupled with this tree, and this is going to go on the very top of the quilt and the very bottom of the quilt. And I'm thinking about cutting another slice of this and having it upright like trees on both edges. So again, we're just thinking it out, going with it, running with it, and this is going to be a twin. No, this is going to be a queen size quilt that will be similar, using the same colors and a lot of the same blocks of the quilt that we finished last month. So I'm extremely excited about this, and it looks like the other one is just going on the long arm now, as I just showed you, and this one will be ready for the long arm, I'm hoping, in just another day or two. So I'm very excited about this and can't not wait to share it complete. But alas, it's time to go sew. And we are now sewing together row 2 of our 13.5 by 10.5 inch blocks. Right. And this, again, my friends, is row 2 of our 13.5 inch blocks that we were working on. We now have them put together. It's time to go over to the ironing board with a couple of other rows and go ahead and press the seams and make sure that we are ready to go ahead and connect them to the next set, the next row. Yay! And we are at the sewing machine. And let's go ahead and press some of our seams down. I've brought 3 rows to the ironing board, then we'll do the other 3 rows, and then we will be ready to sew our rows together. I am told bloopers are in order. I am not sitting at my sewing machine. I am standing at my iron. And I have it on the, whoops, pushed it the wrong way. I am on the cotton setting with steam. And that way I am pressing down my seams. They go much, much faster when you have steam. And again, I am working with cotton. So that is good for the fabric, does not hurt a thing. Okay, 1 row ironed, and now let's do the other 2. And then we're going to lay them back out on the bed, and then take 2 rows at a time over to the sewing machine and sew them up. And then we'll put on our, we'll cut out some side borders, which I think is going to be the one fabric that I mentioned to you. And then we will put those on, and then we'll put our top and bottom borders on. And then I think we are going to be ready to to show you the final product. So I'm extremely excited about that. And I cannot wait. The great thing about a scrappy quilt, my friends, is the seams do not have to line up. I've changed a few rows around, so now you may be looking at a different order of things. And I want to take a look at the overall quilt before I sew the rows together, because I don't want any of them too close together. Like you see this one and this one, I'm a little bit nervous about. But when I flip the rows around and try different angles, I always find that perhaps I didn't use enough variety, as I'm coming into very similar patterns, similar layouts. So as of right now, this is how I have the quilt laid out. And we are going to go ahead and start sewing the rows together. So I am feeling really great about this. I think after I flip those 3 rows around a couple of times, I think that this setup right here is the way we're going to go ahead and sew it together. I wish I could give you a better view. To prevent bulk on the sewing machine, I am sewing 2 rows together at a time. So we have the bottom 2 rows done, then we still have to do these, but we have these 2 done. Now we're going to do the top 2 rows. We are now sewing the top 2 rows to the bottom 4 rows. So we're holding a lot of bulk, a lot of weight, that we need to manipulate onto the table and through the sewing machine without pulling or torquing our fabrics. And we also need to keep our seams going and laying the same direction that we have pressed them to stay. So that is another consideration when you're doing a long distance. And if you were going to pin any of your rows, this is definitely the 2 rows that you would pin, because they are the most apt with the weight and the length to need to be held together, because they want to pull and torque. So you do want to adjust your fabric every couple of inches. Make sure that you're still lined up, that it's not pulling one direction or the other direction. So just be conscious of where your seams are, where your edges are, and help it not to pull. And I can't wait to hold this quilt up and show you our progress. My goodness, down to the last block. Looky, looky. Six rows complete. 7 blocks wide. And now we have to think about borders. And right now it's running about a full size. So we want to add borders to increase it to being a queen size quilt. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and add a strip on both sides that's 5 inches long. So we are going to have this strip going length-wise up and down both sides of the quilt. And now on my Brother sewing machine, it is time to add the bottom border to our quilt. So we're putting the bulk of the weight up on the table. We're facing them face to face, making sure everything is going upright, and then we're stitching them together. constantly adjusting the weight, keeping it on the table so it doesn't pull and torque. And I adjust with pulling underneath fabric as well as sometimes pulling the top fabric to make them line up perfect. So constantly verifying, rechecking, realternating, realigning. Okay, my friends, and with the quilt laid out, this is what we are seeing. It does fit a queen size bed, but the sides don't drop down as much as perhaps we would like them to be. The size measurements works for an oversized double, but again, as you can see, it fully covers a queen size mattress. And I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial with me. It is very similar to the other one we made with these, a lot of the same blocks, but we don't have the triangle borders around the entire quilt. And this one is more of a water-based scene, where the other one was more of a tree and land-based scene. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you back. We have another quilt tutorial coming up next week. I am so excited on this one. You cannot miss it. See you soon, my friends.